I thought I would start today by offering an apology, and I'll explain why. I did a Sunday Q&A session 2 weeks ago on the DB9, and inevitably, because we're talking to somebody who's in the trade, it was Neil Calvert at Aston Workshop, we ended up talking about some of the things that might go wrong with the DB9, but I didn't start the conversation by saying what a bloody brilliant car it is and how most of them are actually pretty much flawless. You will get the odd problem. And certainly somebody said, oh, I'd have slipped my wrists if I knew he was going to talk like that all the time and I'm going to sell my DB9. But I think actually that's not the way it is. So in future, I will start by saying what a brilliant car or model it is and the other things, so it doesn't come across as a tale of woe and doom. The second thing I'm going to do is apologize right now to Adam, because I think somebody must have been dreaming of getting away to San Francisco and they spelt his name wrong in the flyer that went out. But really, it's actually Adam's fault, because when I first met him, he was known as Adam Don, but he's lengthened his name to what it actually should be. So he's brought it all upon himself. And the final thing I should say is disclose that actually I do have a business relationship with CALLUM's. As some of you may or may not know, I put automatic gearboxes into cars that they weren't designed for, and I helped CALLUM's with the engineering to offer a 6-speed automatic conversion for the Vanquish. So I'm declaring, hands up, declaring that I obviously know them reasonably well. And that's one of the reasons I was able to strong arm Adam in coming and talking to us today. But for anybody who's got a Vanquish, I think it'll be very interesting. I think for anybody who's got an Aston, it'll be interesting, because it is the first time that somebody's gone back as a team and revisited a car. And you might call it Vanquish Mark III, because the S was the Mark II. But anyway, without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Adam, who's the engineering director, and he's going to talk about it. It's not a sales pitch. We prepared this, and it's really more of a talk about the engineering side of it and what they did, which I hope will be interesting to people. Adam, over to you.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for that introduction, Richard. I'll share some slides with you guys and girls. I wanted to make this not the shiny, we've got loads of shiny whiz-bang pictures of everything, and we've got sales stuff and all that kind of stuff, but as a greasy, oily bit engineer, I'm hoping and thinking that you guys want to see something a little bit more with a bit more depth, and maybe even have a look at some of the issues we've had when we decided to do what we wanted to do with the car. So there'll be warts and all. There'll be some broken bits and other elements. And I hope I hit the right note in terms of not patronising you all, the things you already know, and not getting lost in the detail. I'm sure Richard will pull me up if I start to geek off about something or other. So bear with me, if you will, and we'll.
So some Adam, start by explaining how you got to where you are.
Well, I've been working in the low volume automotive business for a number of years. Cut my teeth at Mitsubishi World Rally Team, Noble, Aston Martin Special Projects, progressively, then Jaguar Land Rover Special Projects. And I obviously met some fantastic people along the way, Ian Callum being one of them, and my two other business partners in Callum. And we decided one day, look, why don't we leave and start this up for ourselves, because we've been doing this kind of thing for so long. We like to see the fruits of our labor a little bit and try and do some exciting projects. So that's essentially the shortened version. We jumped ship, and the four of us started up a business called Callum. We actually started two businesses, Callum Designed and Project 4 Design, which is more the operational side. And then very briefly, the investor for the first project, the Callum 25, that will Vanquish 25, that we'll go through now, became closer and closer to us, and we merged one of our businesses, the operational engineering side, into his business, the two Swiss doctors, to create R-Reforged, which is a boutique automotive engineering business, basically. So I don't want to make it very confusing for everybody. It's basically a partnership between Callum Design and R-Reforged, and I have two hats to wear in that business. I'm the head of engineering for R-Reforged and the director of engineering for Callum. So hopefully that wasn't too confusing.
No, that's good.
Good, it makes some sense. So let me start to share a few elements of this project, if I may. All right, so hopefully you'll see a slightly grumpy picture of me in a car.
Yep, we're seeing it.
Great. So I think I've explained a little bit about myself. I've been lucky enough to work on a lot of exciting cars in the past. Noble M600. I led the project for Vantage GT12 and GT8. Those are my babies. Went into Aston when there was a very small special projects team and tried to swim upstream against everybody, trying to ask for some help to get those projects off the ground, and some fantastic support in the end to make some hopefully you'd agree really great projects. So I've got a little bit of experience in this kind of low volume battle against the odds type of game, which is kind of what we're doing, I guess, right now. So I'm going to talk very generally and briefly right now about what we've done to the car, and then we can zoom into some of the details and tell a little bit more of the story of the car itself. From a design perspective, this was initially Ian's real passion project and a personal project that's essentially completely got out of hand. But I'm not going to talk too much about the design aspects because I'll be talking out of school and Ian will tell me off, or he probably won't, but I don't want to slip into that. We might get Ian on if we can to talk about some design features later or next year. Let me start at the front end of the car. So strong design changes, as you can see, new front bumper, all the body components on the car are composite. That front grille is billet aluminium, so each individual piece is machined out of solid 7000 series aluminium, and then we have a lengthy process of, it's essentially like a dark chroming, which was very difficult to get the depth and the luster and all the kind of things that we wanted to get. So that was quite a bit of a challenge to get that right. It's surrounded by a beautiful carbon bezel. The brake ducts that you can see that replace the fog lights, that was a partially design led, partially engineering led, because we really felt and knew that we needed some brake cooling, dedicated brake cooling on the car. I think, let me just wind back 1 second. One of the things that I wanted to make you guys all aware of is we really like the Vanquish, the original Vanquish. It's a fantastic car. And as Richard pointed out this morning, I don't want to go into this and say that we've changed this. It's vastly amazing, and the original car was rubbish. It certainly wasn't. What we wanted to do is dial up the things, the attributes that we really liked, up to 11, and take away the things that either from a technological perspective or a design perspective or one of the handlings chassis perspective rather, that we didn't like about the car. So there's a bit of a balance here. So we are big fans of Vanquish in any form. But yeah, so getting back to the brake cooling, so that's a brake cooling duct there, but bespoke goes into the brake system that we'll talk about later. Full new ceramic brakes in partnership with Brembo. The headlights, they're upgraded to an LED system, new headlight buckets and lenses, and then obviously the design features inside. There's some extra large bonnet vents there, just trying to open up some of that engine bay, get some of the heat out of the front end. A new wheel. The wheel's an interesting, quick story. When we were having a look at different wheel designs, it really wasn't clicking from a kind of why are we doing this perspective. We had lots of different flavors of design, and we had to sort of start to ask the question, Ian, what did you not like about the original wheel? And he said, well, I really like the original wheel, just needed to be a bit bigger. And I was really hoping to get a big, stronger offset on the wheels so that the stance of the car looked great. And it was a bit of a pivotal moment for us to say, right, we're not trying to reinvent the wheel, pun intended. We're really trying to just augment it, turn it up to 11, as I say, and make it look the best it can be. So it still carries heavy design cues from the original wheel. Tire, we've got tire choice with Michelin. We'll talk about that later. If we go around to the back of the car, there's a unique bespoke muffler and diffuser integration that we'll talk a little bit about. New rear lights, it's a big feature on the car, and again we'll touch on the pitfalls and joys of doing that type of project. Interior is hugely upgraded and replaced, so all of the components pretty much are replaced in the interior. It's quite challenging. We wanted to get better quality level, wanted some more up-to-date technology, and then some more premium materials in there as well. So it's and then we get on to things like the chassis. There's a full chassis tune that we've put into. We'll talk a bit about the whys and wherefores of that, but that's dampers, spring choice, anti-roll bars, bushes, and all sorts of stuff. So that's sort of I'll give you just a general outline of there, and we can dive into some of the detail. But one of the things that struck me as soon as you jump into a Vanquish is there could be an improvement in the level of connection that you have with the car. And I think this is the thing that it really strikes you. You kind of sit on top of the seats quite a bit in the Vanquish, not inside them. And you've got a lot of things to concentrate on with the chassis. And we thought that we could enhance the connection, and some of those very quick things that you feel when you get into a car, you feel like you wear it rather than you feel like you sit on top of it. And the first thing that struck us was the steering wheel. So we actually take the steering wheel, which is, this is a bit of a crazy thing to do, frankly, but it's the way in which we had to do it to get the result. And we thin the rim out. We actually machine it, we scanned it, we surfaced it digitally, as you can see in the top right there. And we put it on a 5-axis milling machine, and we machine the whole of the rim of the steering wheel. As you can see here, some pretty rough pictures of the wheel itself. A very laborious process. But what that does for us is it gives the rim of the wheel thinner. Some of the features where it pushes your hand off the wheel, the more you can have your hands around it, you really just enhances that connection feeling in the car. The second thing that was significant is the seat. We felt that you sat too high in the seat. You didn't get enough support from the bolsters. So we've redesigned actually pretty much the whole, retooled for the foams, a new lower substrate, and obviously the retrimmed the seat as well. And here's a picture of Gary, one of our most experienced trimmers, the guy who runs a trim shop. He's been Aston for, I think, 30 years, man and boy, knows the ins and outs of pretty much everything that's been done so far. And here he is at the moment. The problem with doing a seat is you can do it from data, and you then tool up for it, then you inject your foams, and then you sit in it and you go, I don't really like this. So there's a bit of a big iterative process. So we use a lot of digital, but also a lot of traditional methods, and you can see Gary here. What he's doing there is a injected mold foam that we've modeled and then produced, and then we've sat in it and we've skived it by hand, and he's now patterning it, and then we scan it and we put all that back into the CAD, and then eventually we inject our new foams. And all of that really is to get you sitting slightly lower in the car, and then bring the bolsters slightly higher. It doesn't want to turn it into a horrendous bucket seat, just wants to be a GT feel of seat. And again, just enhances your connection in the car. You feel like you're wearing the car rather than sitting on top of it. So interior, we touched upon at the beginning. Higher level of quality. A lot of the components that you can see in that interior shot are machined out of billet aluminium. We do that because it makes sense, because we're only doing a limited run of 25 of these cars. So from a sort of tooling perspective, it's vastly expensive, but then you get some jewel-like components. You don't have to play around with plastics to get an aluminium feel. And you can have huge precision control over those components, as you'd imagine. So as I say, pretty sort of holistic approach to the interior. There are a lot of elements from a design perspective and a quality perspective that Ian was not happy with in the original car. We had the time and budget to address those. One of the things that we have to hold on in the interior, of course, is the airbags. So that is a little bit of a limiting factor, although the steering wheel has been sort of heavily redesigned as we talked about. So this is just a little bit of a detailed shot showing some of the data that we produced. Obviously, we don't, although we have an agreement with Aston Martin to do this project, we don't have any data from them for this particular project. So everything has had to be scanned, re-engineered, reverse engineered back into our systems. So it's a pretty long and laborious process, but eventually you get control over your own CAD and your own surfaces, and then you can start to play around and model the things that you need to. So on the left hand side there you see a lot of the billet machined components, these what we call the beams, the muck beams, for some reason, I have no idea why. They run either side of the dash there, and they are machined out of a huge chunk of billet. It's quite a satisfying process at the end. And then you can see just the levels of trim and componentry that goes into the various bits in the interior. The car was never designed to be a 2+2 in its inception. It was always a 2+0, and he was very keen to return it to a 2+0. Now, if a customer comes and asks us, look, I really would like the very small rear seats put in, we can, of course, we can be flexible and do that. But this is the spec that we'd like to see the car in, and you've got various luggage and fluffy bits that go in the back seat there, strapped into bespoke straps and all that kind of loveliness. This is just a little bit of an outline. So we're lucky enough with our engagement with Richard, which has been a very much two-way street, to offer an automatic transmission on the car, which is actually getting to a very good stage of calibration at the moment. The guys have been working very hard to get it to what we think is an appropriate level of calibration for this particular car's character. We also offer the option of the manual shift, which is Aston Martin Works shift. We're actually changing various elements on that just to get it to shift in the way that we want to, take a bit of friction out of the system. It's quite sensitive to set up the shift conversion. And once you've got it fully set up, it's not a bad shift, but we'd like to change things in certain areas. This is just a little bit of a laugh. We do use a lot of rapid prototyping in our business. You know, even just for visuals. This is a gear knob that we rapid prototyped in house. On the far left there, somebody got the scale wrong. So that's probably about the size of your clenched fist, that gear shift, which sometimes not everything goes to plan. So we had a bit of a chuckle when we received that in the business. And these slides essentially just show you the progression. Obviously, shift quality is a lot to do with shift inertia and the weight that you put in. We've got a couple of voids that we machine inside the middle of that part on the third slide left, and we can put in lead or boron or whatever we fancy in terms of mass, just to increase that shift inertia to get that shift quality feel. So there are lots of little tunables, and this is just us having a bit of a way out to see where we ended up in terms of mass and shift quality. Lighting. So lighting in the automotive world, again, forgive me if I'm telling you something you already know, is a big deal. It's hugely expensive. I always feel it's a bit of a racket, but the guys that do it do a very good job. I think our quotes for the rear lights were about £500,000, our first quote with development. So a significant investment for a small business like ourselves. Now, we didn't go for that first quote. As a tight Scotsman, I just couldn't bring myself to do it. So we had to play around a little bit, and we got a couple of suppliers actually that we work with, and we've done a lot of the development ourselves, which has been an interesting journey. I'm going to show you some not the best photos here. So this is one of the biggest pitfalls in lighting, is especially if you're looking for what is in vogue at the moment, this constant light bar, is maintaining a constant diffuse light appearance. And as you can see here, at this point, we didn't have that. This hot spotting, as it's called, is frankly a huge issue to try and tune the lenses and the optics, because of course they have to meet a target in terms of light emission. They have to be homologated and certified, but they also want to be not bright enough to create hot spots, diffuse enough to create that sort of equal glow that we're all used to seeing when we're driving down the street. So when you're following a car tonight, have a look at the lights, and you can see which one of the OEs have spent the money on the lights and which ones are less bothered about it. And to be honest, the majority of people out there are very good at this, but then they throw millions and millions of pounds at that process. So it's been a great learning experience for us. A lot of bench work, a lot of prototyping. I think these first set were about £15,000 on the car, just low volume machined lenses. You've really got to validate all of this kind of stuff until you're ready to press the big boy button on the tooling, which we'll be doing very shortly. We also use some computer simulation from one of the suppliers to actually see the hot spotting, which is really interesting. They can actually predict from the refraction of the geometry and everything exactly how the hot spots will appear on the lenses, and it's fairly good in terms of correlation with real life. So something that we've had some interesting times with, to put it nicely. Chassis. So as I say, we love the original Vanquish, but we wanted some particular attributes from the chassis perspective to be uplifted. I think from a general perspective, the feeling, biggest overriding feeling whilst driving the Vanquish is the lack of rear roll support. The car drops off a bit of a cliff in terms of roll as a sort of almost a falling rate, and it sort of leans over and doesn't ever become that planted. So that's one of the things we wanted to really make a difference to. One of the other things was the on-center steering feel, the sort of steering attack. Those are the two overriding characteristics that we'd like to improve. But also generally, we really didn't want to lose sight of the fact that this car was a GT car. You know, a lot of people can throw springs at a car and corrupt its ride quality. And you know, I'm a firm believer that a car doesn't need to be stiff to be fast. And certainly, in fact, you could be a lot slower if you're much stiffer over potholes and our B roads. So what we wanted to do was really create a little bit of a magic carpet ride with the car, let the damping breathe a little bit, support it better at the rear so you had a bit more confidence going into a bend, and then get a little bit more steering attack. Now this is the damper tuning that we do in-house, and this throughout my career has always amazed me. We got some fantastic people on our team, and when we're driving down the road and we go, okay, I want it to turn in a little bit firmer, or that little bump there, I want it to be slightly better. And our guys will turn to me and say, okay, well, it's the fourth shim down on the second stack and it needs to be 0.1 instead of 0.2. And it just continually blows my mind, frankly. So this is just a little bit of an example of the layout that we do when we're tuning dampers, just to show all of the shims that go into the shim pack. Yeah, I'm sure you'll agree, it's well, I wouldn't like to put it back together without them around anyway. So part of, well, before I go on, so part of what you can do with the damping is actually change the chassis response quite dramatically. We've really focused in on to try and get that steering attack with the damping, as well as the spring choice that we've changed, and also we've tilted for a new anti-roll bar. We've pulled the track out wider, which gives you a bit more stability, but we've also used obviously a much more technologically advanced tire that was ever available now, which brings me on to the next slide. Beautifully segued there, guys. I hope you're taking notes. So this is a fantastic partnership we have with Michelin. I've used Michelin for pretty much my whole career, I would say. We're back and forth with Pirelli and Michelin. What I like about Michelin from a core commercial perspective is they're very willing to support these small projects. I brought them back into Aston Martin for GT12, and then we used them on GT8, and then subsequently some of the AMR products. Fantastic business, very supportive. And when we approached them as little old Callum, as we first started, went to the Paris Motor Show and spoke to the big boss Lorenzo, who's head of specialty projects. He was fantastic in supporting us, saying, "Yeah, brilliant. We'd love to support your 25 off run." And this is one of the perks of having that relationship, is we get to use Michelin's test site in Le Doux, down in France. The guys there are world class. They've got fantastic facilities, dry, wet handling. This is us at the end of one of the sessions that we did there. They've also got a measurement plates in the tarmac that you do high speed running over, and that assesses the aerodynamic load on the car. So we did a bit of up front simulation because of the changing of the diffuser and front end, just to check that we've not overtly changed the balance. And this gave us an actual physical sign off to say, yeah, brilliant, over this speed range, we've got 1% balance shift, which was a really good result. So just one of the perks, as well as, of course, all of the tire elements to the tuning that you get from working with a business like Michelin. The tire choice, there's about 8 different variants of front and about 5, I think 4 or 5 that we had to choose from. And each of these variants for a given size gives a wild change in characteristic. It could be a construction change, could be a compound change, could be a combination of both. So you really can change the balance of a car with just the tires, depending on what you chose. We ended up with a AMG front and what they call an RT rear, which is a Michelin replacement tire. So it's their sort of default fitment for a certain size. And we feel that gives a really good balance, much more rear grip. It's a really strong rear tire, and then some precision that's needed from the front end of the car. So a very good lever. Tires make a huge difference. It's it's why you'll buy your N0 for your Porsche and your Aston Martin specific tires or Mercedes tires. It actually does make a big difference, as probably some of you have found out. So during one of these adventures, I just thought I'd show you a few of these slides here. This is one of our test trips down to, I think this was a Michelin test trip actually. We were doing some mileage accumulation on our integrated muffler sort of silencer, which is an idea that Ian and I came up with. And not everything goes to plan, as you'd imagine. I think halfway through France, we decided doing some sustained running at high air speeds, obviously within the speed limit. We arrived at a small village, sounding more like a, say, Group B rally car than a lovely GT car, as we'd failed the rear silencer. So, I mean, I quite enjoy these kind of reactive missions where we're like, right, we've got a few hours, we need to get the thing sorted. We found this lovely Frenchman who tigged our silencer up, and we did some off the cuff modifications, and he put us in his little garage up there in the top right for half a day, and we got to it to change the muffler. So yeah, quite good fun really, all in all, but just part of the development process really. I think the middle one there is just showing how capable of a GT car it is, because I can't remember how many cases we got in, but we got a lot of cases in on the way back. So a mission fully accomplished in that. So just to touch upon this little trick that we've developed on the rear of the car. I've always thought that it seems a shame to have an exhaust hot thing hemmed in by an under tray and a diffuser. It's sort of counterintuitive really. Why can't that thing do more than just one thing? So we designed this muffler silencer in the shape of the diffuser. We've gone for a much more aggressive diffuser, and we picked the rear trailing edge up. And this is a great collaboration between Ian and myself, or engineering and design, coming up with something that we think looks beautiful, but is fully functional. So we've got better diffuser performance. We also take more of the heat off the surface of it. Obviously, I had some development challenges, as you've seen, but I think it's an effect well worth spending the time and effort and money on. The picture on the right there is the exhaust tip, and that's actually rapid prototyped, sintered Inconel, which is a stainless. Some of you probably know is a very tough stainless steel. This pattern that the design guys wanted on the, or we wanted on the end of the tip there, you can't machine because of the radiuses and the compound geometry. Because trust me, we tried. So the only way to do this was to use some of this fantastic technology that exists right now. They're expensive, but they really make the thing pop and really work from a design and feature perspective. So it's these little details using these technologies that we've got to play with. And we cleaned up the appearance of the underside of the car as a new exhaust routing with some more cooling on the underside, as you can see. So an interesting feature anyway on the car. Performance. So when we were looking at the car from the beginning of the project, we talked about what we should do with an engine performance figure, and came to the conclusion that the car doesn't really need 700 horsepower. It's very capable as it is. We wanted an uplift in the way it performed, really the whole car, the car wants to be a sum of its parts rather than one outlying attribute. Like, this is 700 horsepower monster, but nobody can drive it. So we wanted to try and keep this kind of cohesive ethos of the design and engineering. So we looked around to see what was available from an engine perspective. Obviously the top left didn't fit, being a Merlin engine. And we decided upon, with the help of some suppliers that we know, about 60-70 horsepower uplift. That's headers, calibration, cams, which is great. Flat increase in torque. Interestingly, it also gave us quite a distinct engine note that we didn't really want. I quite like to push the car to more of a V12 soundtrack. Some of you Aston V12 purists might disagree that you like that, but it's part of the issues with fitting equal length primaries to a car is it can change it to sound like, well, frankly, it sounded like somebody was chasing us with a two-stroke in this particular installation. So we actually played around with acoustic specialist, with the design of the muffler, changing the lengths of the tubes inside, the resonance and the stiffness of the muffler, which makes a very a big effect on some of the resonance effects, to create a sound which, because we got rid of the exhaust valves, because I wanted a really natural linear building noise rather than a step change, like sometimes you find on for example, the V8, Vantage V8. And we managed, I think, to get a really, really good, honest V12. Still got a bit of bass to it, but it's quite peaky when it gets up in terms of its soundtrack. And it's a nice tone, and it's not overly loud. So that's the performance package in terms of the engine, which I think works quite well. Client experience. One of the things that we want to be able to, as a small business, as R-Reforged and CALLUM, to offer is a really bespoke client experience. It's very difficult, having been in the OEs, to offer much of a change from the norm, depending on how extreme your norm is. It's a real challenge because the everyday business has to be so rigored, and we get the opportunity as a small business to be able to be flexible. So we're doing a lot of interesting things with clients. We're trying to, we're giving them an experience in terms of hanging out with Ian. We organise, we've got a fantastic restaurant in Zurich that take the customers to, and various other elements around our little group of companies to try and give them the best experience. And one of the things that we do is, when we spec a car with a customer, they actually get a live 3D re-render of their car, which is actually something that we don't see that anybody else offers at the moment, and they're really enjoying that kind of experience. So you can see here, this is one of the slightly more subtle specifications in yellow that one of the customers has specified in the interior. On top left there's Alec, one of our senior designers, and he does a fantastic live modification of the cars. And we've had some interesting requests. One of our customers is going for a full mahogany dash top, which has been a good engineering challenge to get it around some of the complex geometry around the top of the dash and everything. So you know, the whole point of being small and flexible is you can offer all of these weird and wonderful requests, you know, be it crazy colors or actually component changes in the cars. You know, we're having commissions for some slight body changes to make some unique one-offs within that 25 limited run of cars as well. So quite exciting from an engineering point of view to try and achieve some of the wackier ideas that have been thrown at us.
Excellent. Well, Adam, thank you. I hope that's given people a good overview and flavour. I think at this point I'd perhaps encourage Adam to now go slightly off-piste in terms of talking about some of the other things that R-Reforged are doing. Some of you will have seen the Sagato twins, and Adam's going to talk about that. And then if you've got questions, start putting them on the chat, and we will fire them at Adam and hope he can answer them.
That sounds like a challenge. Let me, Richard, would you like me to share and talk a little bit more about the other bits right now?
Yeah, I would. I think probably we've got 20 minutes left, chaps. So I think probably that makes sense to do, unless anybody. And again, I'm struggling to. I need to see my chat. There's two chats in here. Yep.
This is some of the testing that we undertake with my young son. I think he's doing the break-in test there. So one of the other projects that we do at the moment is IVAing the Db4 Gt Continuation cars. And apart from having these beautiful cars around the factory, which frankly is a big plus and one of the reasons to do it alone, it's a great challenge. There's some subtle changes that we need to make to the car, or rather we want to try and keep the changes subtle that we do to the car. We've got hidden indicators, we've got a fog light that comes off the back of the car, and then it can be redeployed, and a few other nice elements to that project. Here's a little bit of a rundown of the things that the customer gets. So the customer will receive this campaign case with all of the components he either wants to leave fitted to the car, or some of the customers like to get the certificate and tick the box to say, right, return it back to its standard condition, which is obviously non-road homologated, but we will supply all of the bits in this lovely little campaign trunk, and there's a few little features in there, and it just makes it, I think, a nicer service for the guys that ask for this. I think we've done about 8 of these cars so far. We've got Db4 GT Sagato due to come up next year, and also a Db5 Goldfinger for us to have a look at. So again, fantastic to have these cars around. Because of their value, it's interesting for our insurance company, depending on how many we have in the building, and especially when we're talking about Zagatos and Db5s, it could be quite an interesting conversation. We have one at a time only, but yeah, fabulous things to have around really, and enjoy working on those things.
Adam, why don't you talk about the difficulty of getting those engines through the emission standard?
Yeah, I mean, it's a challenge, Richard, of course. Modern catalyst technology is very good. You have what you've got to play to your strength is we're doing a very low volume of these. So you can get a catalyst made with a lot more PGM, precious metals. You got PGM group metals, rhodium and platinum and various other, well, they're all, I think, platinums. Somebody I'm sure smarter than me on the forum will be able to pick me up on this, but and you can load them up with different precious materials to get a better performance on the catalysts. We've built the catalyst into the silencer. We have also improved the silencer from we have to make it quieter for the test itself. So that you've got a silencer and a catalyst module that we build into the silencer, so you can swap it out if you want to go on your track days and all that kind of stuff. And obviously at the front end we do some tuning, jets and air correctors and various things to get the car to a certain state. You can't lean the car off too much because, of course, apart from engine damage, you fall out of the lambda limit for the test. So there's a bit of a balancing act to play, and we learned a lot more about carburetors than we thought we would be. So a very interesting project, Richard, to be honest.
Well, having put fuel injection the other way around on my car, I learned a lot, and one of the problems is that the number of people around who understand carburetors properly is diminishing by the week as the older generation step away. So it is an issue. So
yeah, it's been interesting. I mean, Richard, we've been using some really high tech technology with some super low tech and traditional technology with scanning. 3D scanning the carburetors to understand the differences within the designs, and then obviously the good old tuning on your analyzer. So it's been quite an interesting kind of old and new collaboration.
What else? It's obviously emissions in these cars, lighting, anything to the brakes or chassis or anything else?
No, we do some. We do what we would term some comfort improvements for the road-going cars. So wheel arch liners pressed in the correct material, the period with louvers and all that kind of stuff. And there's a lot of there's some other comfort features, safety comfort features like that are requirements, like a brake fluid warning lights and sensor. In a new cluster, which is obviously period with period jewels and all that kind of stuff. Some switch gear etched in the same way, hazards, for example. So there's various elements. There's a lot of minimum radius requirements as well. So we do sort of some cunning tricks to get them to pass the test. Some of which might not last too long on the car. For example, we take the wings off the spinners. So it's up to the customer what they would like to do afterwards, obviously within the bounds of whether it's road legal or not. But yeah, it's been a good project. It's a nice project, and as I say, they're just great cars to have around and look at. You know, beautiful pieces of art. I'd love to be lucky enough to own even a normal Db4. Richard, would be a nice thing for me.
Yep. Okay. So Adam, go on a little bit and talk perhaps about the twins. Can you?
So these are the Aston Martin Vantage V12 Sagato Heritage Twins by R-Reforged. And now that's a mouthful. I don't know what our next project will be called. This is a licensed project from Aston Martin to do offering 19 pairs, 19 twins. There's a speedster and a coupe. We've just finished our first prototype cars, which are these physical cars you can see here. I think it was 2010. Sagato originally made with Aston 60 something of the coupe. They've freshened it up. That was originally based on the V12. These are based on V12S. We have a lot of 0 mileage cars that we bought, plus some super low mileage, 100 kilometers kind of cars. And we strip them down, rebody them, retailer the interior. We put an AMR Pro engine performance increase, the GT12 derived performance increase, titanium exhaust system, center locks. So they're really a really nice package. And as I say, we've the first 2 cars first twins we've just constructed, and they've gone out to Switzerland for our R-Reforged have got St. Gallen dealership out there. And they'll be showing customers. Then they'll come back and they'll start on a test program where we'll be, I think, pretty much all around Europe actually for the next sort of 4 months or so, the next year. So yeah, really fantastic project. A slightly different project from the Vanquish in as much as we have access to the data because of the arrangement with Aston Martin. So they've been fantastic in supporting with some of the elements, and that really helps creating the components. As you'd imagine, we don't have to go through the scanning loop, and you can actually understand what the nominal data is rather than scanning several cars and making interpolation between those. But yeah, very enjoyable project that we're kicking off. So you'll see hopefully some, well, you'll see already they're launched in the press, and you'll probably see some of our test cars rocking around in the new year.
Okay, well, that's good. Now, there's a few questions come in, Adam, so if I can fire those at you, starting with, can you talk about where you start on the Vanquish 25? Are you using all S's or some standard, some SDP cars? Where's your starting point?
So it's interesting, we anticipated that we would get non-S's and S's from customers, but at the moment we've only received S's. We would prefer S's, and we advise customers on what. Some of the customers come with their cars, and some of them ask us to go and source them. So I think we're totally open. If a customer comes in with a really nice non-S, and it's been in the family for a while, and as some of these cars have, then absolutely we'd use a non-S. But if the first step of that is an assessment, the second step is that we tear the car down, and when we rebuild the car back up again, that car as a default goes to an S in terms of specification, and then we go plus with our 25 CALLUM 25 components. So really flexible in answer to your question, Richard, although we haven't had any non-S's yet. We'd advise customers to go for S's generally, but because of the obvious upgrades.
Okay. And there are a couple more questions. So have you considered a mild hybrid KERS setup? Well, there we're talking real money.
That's a brilliant question. We haven't, because we knew our limitations, I think. Yeah, I mean, going to the next level of technology, you need to understand your capabilities, and you need to walk your capabilities carefully up the step as a business. Certainly something in the future we'll be looking at.
Okay. And the question which I suspect that you're expecting from someone sooner or later, which is, how many have you sold or taken deposits for so far?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, we've still got some room for other people to join us if you guys are out there. So slightly politician's answer. I'm not going to tell you, but we've been really pleased actually with the response, especially during COVID. The limitation really was a lot of people expressed the serious interest down, a lot of qualified people, and then nobody could come and drive the car. Really, everybody wanted to wait until we had our latest prototype, the P3, what we call the red car that we showed pictures in. And now we're starting to get people through that, and the numbers are ticking up. So we're quietly pleased at where we are. But if any of you chaps or ladies out there, you fancy coming over and putting a deposit down, we've still got a couple of spaces for you for sure.
Okay, now Adam, I know that when you did tire testing, and you talked about construction and compounds, but you put 20-inch wheels on, and somebody says, well, with the increased offset, does that not cause fouling on the wheel arches?
It's a great question, Richard, actually. You touched upon something else that I didn't say when we talked about it. I mean, the first thing you do when you design a car is you start from the ground up. You start from the tire size, you start from the wheel size and the offset. If you're doing a blank sheet of paper, it's really the first thing that you start with. Obviously, it isn't a blank sheet of paper, but we knew we wanted to go bigger on the wheels, and we knew we wanted to pull out the wheels from a stance perspective, from a design perspective, and also give some benefit, give some negatives as well, which we tuned that around. But so the answer to your question is then we do wheel envelopes, and because we haven't got any data, we do it physically on the car in an old school manner where you bump the wheel, you give an offset, and you say, okay, right, this is what we can do with the wheel arch liner. In the front of the car, we've changed the wheel arch liner very slightly. We've got a sort of augmentation on the front of it to just clear it a little bit. But apart from that, they fit really well. But one of the points I was going to mention actually is obviously you pull out the track in a car, and those of you that have done that when you were younger and then saw that your bearings would wear out very quickly, probably know where I'm coming from. You need to justify how you're going to say that, yes, this bearing pack can live with an extra 20 mil offset, because obviously it's just a simple leverage equation. Now, what we've done in this car is we've used the latest last level big bearing pack, which is actually from 177. It's on all of we put it on all the GT12, GT8 cars. It's a bigger bearing pack, it's a much stiffer bearing. It's actually, we ran it on all of the GT4 race cars. So as soon as you get slicks on a car, obviously all your loads go up, and your durability, if you're lasting at the Nürburgring 24 hours, your durability is validated there and then. And in fact, the bearings that we use on the car, they're on Rapide, but they were used on the last Aston GT3 car behind the single nut adapter. So that's a big tick in the box from a diligence perspective. You know, okay, there's a bit of inside knowledge to say, yeah, we know where these components come from, but it all makes for a reliable product in the end, and then makes me sleep well at night that we've either tested it or we know that there's diligence in what we're doing, so we're not just being cowboys with it.
I was fascinated when talking to them by the fact that they'd done all this tire testing with the Michelins and got to the same place that we got to, which is thinking that the PS2Ss were very good and then the PS4Ss. But what I hadn't appreciated was that Michelin make that in a variety of compounds. And actually, they tried the Porsche compound and they tried the Mercedes compound. And actually, the Mercedes compound is a better fit to the Vanquish than the Porsche compound, which, I mean, that's a level of detail that I didn't understand.
It was quite interesting, the whole process. It always is. We run a we run a 992 rear, Porsche 992 rear, and a Boxster S rear on the front 265, and that setup was very good in the dry, but it took a little bit of the attack off the steering, bit of the feel away from it, and in the wet handling circuit it was just hilarious fun, but not really the kind of hilarious fun that you want to have in an early morning on Monday roundabout when you're half asleep. So we took those two setups back actually, and just wanted to tick the box to say, yeah, we do think that Porsche setup isn't the right setup, and right enough on the road it transpires not to be. So that's where we landed on the RT and the M01.
Okay, now Oliver Taylor asks, what cars did you benchmark against these kinds of projects? Is it essentially the base car plus, or do you consider other cars such as, well, and this is very relevant to you, Adam, Singer Porsche, or more modern cars? And what effect did the heated upper surface of the diffuser, either muffler, have on aero performance?
Benchmarking. So we benchmark, we have fortunately, we have a very good experience with driving a lot of different cars. Porsches, all of the cars that you would imagine you would drive in that kind of segment. Specifically for this project, we spent a bit of time in DBS, outgoing DBS, or the previous DBS. Obviously, you benchmark the Vanquish and the Vanquish S products fundamentally, and that's your reference point as you go backwards and forwards to say, right, you know, where have we come from and where are we going? The issue with being too beholden to that is that's a car of a time, and we want to try and bring the car to another time. So it's a reference point just which keeps you honest, I think. But in terms of having a true reference point, you're really looking at more GT cars that are more modern, really. And we were in Bentleys, and we were in that far end of things. We also obviously 991. We benchmarked to try and find that sweet spot and make sure we didn't go too far into hardened sports car territory, because, as I say, this is a GT car, you know, and this is exactly where it needs to be. So yeah, I think we're pretty pleased with the outcome. It'd be great if some of you could get a drive in the car. And what was the second question? The aerodynamic performance. Road car aerodynamics is, generally speaking, we don't talk about huge downforces unless it's something very trick that Gordon Murray would be designing. So it's really all about balance rather than downforce, to be truthful. A lot of the cars are balanced by trimming lift. A lot of the road cars that you guys and we all drive day to day will have been finely trimmed with tire fences, which go underneath near the wheels. You'll see the little flip downs, and really they use those in order to balance, sometimes, most of the time, to generate more lift in order to get a nice balance and steering feel and confident feel at higher speeds. So we got improvement from a balance perspective from the diffuser. In terms of the thermal aerodynamic performance, not something that I don't think that would be, I think it'd be negligible, and it's not something we looked at. It's really more about managing the heat that comes off the bottom of the exhaust system and not hemming it into that car. As many of you guys know, that one of the biggest vices of a Vanquish is its heat, because of it's all flat floored, it's all very hemmed in. There's a bit of a sort of spiral of issues there that you get when you do those kind of things, for I'm sure the right reasons back in the day when they developed it. So yeah, I don't think there's any aerothermal. It's not a sort of blown diffuser or anything like that, as much as I'd like to claim it was.
Okay, and I think, Adam, we've got 5 minutes more. Can you talk a little bit about perhaps some of the future things that you might or might not do, and also where you think that, in a sense, the market is going for these kind of specials and one-offs? Because obviously there's lots and lots of talk about electric, and we were asked that question about KERS and things, and there are specialist small volume people doing things. It seems a logical sort of extension for Aston, and the twins is perhaps part of that. Can you give us your thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think large multi-cylindered engines are, well, frankly, I think they're awesome, and but I think they're going to be more sought after, quite obviously, as the move to electric vehicles and alternative fuel vehicles. It's here, it's coming. We understand what's going on from that perspective. So I think boutique manufacturers, if I can use a slightly pretentious word, or small manufacturers like ourselves, will have a part to play in prolonging the life of those type of engines, as well as, on one hand, as well as on the other hand, doing projects with EV powertrains and more modern technologies. So you know, if they had the money to do so, I'd be going out now and I'd be buying a collection of V10 and V12 engine cars, and creating a fantastic multi-cylindered collection, if you like. So so I think there's a bit of balance for us. I think there's a bit of opportunity for us as a small sort of semi-coach maker to, as I say, prolong the use of these kind of cars, or certainly the reinvigorating some of these projects.
Mm-hmm. Can you talk anything on the CALLUM horizon that we can be given a hint at?
So from CALLUM's perspective, I can tell you what we've been doing. There's been an interesting project with ProDrive, with the Dakar car that they've just produced. So that's Ian's design, a very challenging package, and quite an interesting one to look at because of the obviously it's a motorsport product. ProDrive felt very heavily that it needed to have some design credentials, and it's quite a difficult package. It's quite upright, it's quite short, so it was I think overall it was a good design challenge for the guys to take on, to deliver it, which what I think is quite a cool looking, interesting looking vehicle. But we're looking at all sorts, Richard. There's nothing I can fundamentally tell you that won't give the game away about what we're working on next from a CALLUM perspective. But there's all sorts of interesting projects. Some that you won't necessarily, some that will come a little left field. But that's really the beauty of having that type of business, that you can look at all sorts of stuff. And then from our Reforged perspective, we are currently talking with a number of other OEs, non-Aston OEs, to look at some interesting projects as well. So although there's still some Aston projects in the wings, so we've got quite a lot of. We're going to be busy, put it that way.
Well, as someone who's been lucky enough to be in their shop and see the technology they've got, I found the whole thing amazing. When we were trying to prepare for this, Adam was going through his computer and looking at things, and when I saw quite how many CAD files they had for the Vanquish, and how they had literally CAD'ed every single component of the car in a reverse fashion, I found it stunning, really, frankly. But that's, I guess, what you have to do if you're going to do a project as good as this. So I was amazed. We just measure it and rough it out of a piece of something other.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I really like to think that we use technology appropriately. I'm sort of I like to think I'm sort of from a slightly more old school approach, where it's sort of, you know, there's a means to an end, and you know, my days designing nobles and things like that, you have to be pragmatic, and as I say, use the technology where it's beneficial rather than just because it's there. And I think we've got a nice balance. You know, sometimes I'm talking to the engineers and they're showing me a thing that's two-dimensional, and they're like, well, we need to scan that, and I was like, no, you don't. You just need to put it on the piece of paper, draw around it, and measure it. You know, and then 10 minutes later you'll have your thing rather than getting the scanner out. So there's a bit of a balance between the technological improvements and whether we use them or not. But yeah, for sure, from a CAD perspective, there's huge amounts of CAD generation and data that goes with it. And certainly the Vanquish has been challenging because you don't have the data to start with. So you're interpolating over multiple scans to try and get the nominal part and saying, okay, this is where we think the nominal is for this particular component. And then you make your prototypes and you test it on. We're lucky enough to have a few cars here, and one of them is an early car, an early ratty car. One of them is a very, very good car, middle of the production run, and one of them is one of the last. So we're sort of swapping around and making sure that we try and hit those nominals and making sure it fits good on things. So yeah, it's an interesting process.
Well, I got a very early lesson in how Aston does things with the V12s, because I had assumed that the V12 that came out of the DB7 would have the same crankshaft as the V12 that came out of the Vanquish, and it doesn't. And you find out by, as you know, accident, or in my case it was. So it's good to know. Okay, Adam, we're at our point. I cannot thank you enough for being so open and straightforward with everybody. There's one other question being asked, but I can answer that for the person, which I'll do offline. So thank you very much for coming and talking to us. Hopefully we'll get Ian to come on next year. As you know, Mark Donoghue, who created this sort of session and an idea, we're trying to build up a reasonable sized list of people going forward to give you more warning. And if there is anybody that members would like to hear from or thought might be interesting, we'd encourage you to communicate with us and tell us, because then we can go and talk to them and see if we can persuade them to come on. I think some people are worried about coming on because they think they're going to get asked all sorts of complicated and difficult questions, but actually I think the key thing is prepping properly and having some fun. So Adam, I think you've done that really well. Thank you very much. And I really appreciate your time and effort.
No, pleasure. Thanks, Richard. It's great to speak to you guys, and hopefully that wasn't boring or otherwise.
No, very good.